Greetings, Gatehouse Insiders. In today's episode of Gatehouse Insights, I am joined by the incredible Simone Heng. Simone is going to dive deeper into the topics of stepping up and how putting your ego aside has so many benefits, how she found her passion and purpose again, human connection, her top 3 tips for connecting with someone and building rapport through Zoom and social media channels, and much, much more. Make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel where you can see it all. So you're a global speaker and a human connection specialist. So tell us a little bit more about how you became immersed in this world.
So I was a radio broadcaster and did a bit of TV, still do a bit of TV for 15 years. And in very diverse markets like Australia, Singapore, Dubai. And one of the things that I really had to learn, and maybe I learned this a little bit from my parents who are migrants in Australia as well, I would watch them pivot their communication to connect with people. And that really became the backbone of what I was doing in radio. And then when I was working in Singapore in radio, I was actually at an organization that was quite toxic. And what I noticed was the effect of disconnection, like people in the office disconnected from themselves. So they only brought a very specific part of them to work. They weren't really showing their true selves in the workplace environment. And we were in a creative line. So I could see how bad the content is. And when I say bad content, I mean content that doesn't add value, doesn't serve people, content that people are apathetic to. I could see how the disconnection of the creator was affecting the product. And so during this time, I was becoming disengaged, but I was also looking at becoming a speaker. I'd always wanted to be a speaker from the time I was young, but you must have a message. You know, being given the mic is a gift. So if you're going to be given that gift, you better be really careful about what you're adding into the world, especially as we are saturated with information right now. So all of these things were happening at once. I was becoming disengaged with the media. I was seeing toxicity and disconnection in the workplace. And then I was working with a mentor to develop a speaking theme. And he was the one that had watched what I did on social media, but knew me as a person and said, you know, human connection is your topic. This is what you've got to look at. And I was like, I don't think I'm the best human connector in the world. You know, we all have that imposter syndrome. And then I started researching and really deep diving into the research. And I realized that my life, a lot of the trauma that I talk about publicly on videos and things has actually been a search for connection. So actually at that point, after reading the studies and the science, everywhere I looked in my life, this connection theme was coming up again and again. And so that's how it started.
Wow, that's incredible. And what year was that? Did you realize that?
Yeah, so 2017 was when I went to seek out a mentor. The toxicity and stuff was like 2015, 2016. And then really 2017 to 2018, I was still in the office and then side hustling, doing all the research, doing free speaking gigs. And then the first 6 months of 2019, I started kind of putting stuff on social media. And then by July of 2019, I left. I could see that my side hustle was out earning my main job because I started getting booked for paid gigs. And then some of them I would have to turn down because I had to work full time. But I added up, if I could be free to accept these, how much would it be? And I worked out, okay, 3 months in a row would have out earned your full-time job. And so I finished my 4-year contract and was literally on the edge of losing all confidence in myself. The actual process of educating myself on human connection and the speaking saved me, because if I hadn't done that, I would have had zero confidence left and really left the bullying and toxicity of that workplace. And it would have taken me a long time to get back emotionally on my feet to do anything creative. But because I'd been doing it on the side, the speaking saved me. It really did. So yeah, that's what happened. So since the middle of 2019, I've been a full-time speaker running a speaking business.
That's incredible. And I love how you felt the imposter syndrome, which we do feel, especially for women. I feel like it's more common in us females, but I love how you pushed through that and just kept going.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because male speakers are probably the most confident and bordering overconfident people you will ever meet. And it was always really amazing to me that how many women speakers or women wanting to become speakers battled with this. Firstly, I don't want to put myself out there online, which with COVID-19, that is your job as a speaker now. It's not just a book and speaking B2B within corporates. It's also online, sharing a message with the world. So a lot of women don't want to do that. I was okay with that already because of the media stuff, but calling yourself an expert, like I literally remember the first day a client put me on their flyer for a speaking gig and called me human connection expert. And I had been told at the beginning when I was researching speaking that you never call yourself an expert. It's got to be named by other people. So I put specialist because I was like, I'm still growing in the area. But it was a wonderful thing that I was like, wow, like it's happened. Like it's happened. But whereas a man, I think, would immediately go, after 6 months, I'm an expert in whatever, right? So it's definitely a female thing, I think, the imposter syndrome. And people think that I've never experienced that because I come across as so confident. But if you want to rebrand, pivot, or start anything new in life, and Louise, you know this because you've had many iterations as well, you have to go through a period of not feeling good enough and imposter syndrome. And what separates the people who become successful from those that don't are the people who put in the effort to go from imposter syndrome to expert. It's that easy. So everyone feels self-doubt. It's like, what are you going to do to move from that to something else? And the people that remain at the end are the people that you see living their best life.
I love that. That's really good. Now, in 2014, you mentioned that you lost your creativity, and it happens. We get lost, we get distracted along the way, we get unmotivated, and just things come up. But could you share a little bit about, I suppose, when you realized you lost that creativity, and then what steps you did and what actions you took to bring that passion back into your life?
Yes, so just the background is that from the day that I popped out of the womb, I've been able to speak always as a kid, very articulate and also very, very creative. And the only time in my life that I really had a creative block was when I repatriated back to Australia to take care of my mum who had a massive stroke. And culturally, as an Asian woman, amongst my community, they would think that that's normal, that's what you should do. But the Western part of me, being raised in a Western country, wanted to have autonomy, freedom. So it was this kind of wrestle within me of like the expectations versus what I need, I now know, to be happy. And I actually think creativity is very linked to self-connection. Creatives either produce things based on two different extremes. So you could be like the type of creative who writes the best song when you're down, you're super, super down. And a lot of famous poets, songwriters get inspiration at their worst moments. Or you could be like me, that's actually a creative with quite a business brain. And the two are very interplayed. I'm not, so creative that I could live busking, for example. I like comfort. So I now know my character really well, but I had to go through that to realize that I need some basic things. I'm not the creative that creates things from being down. I need to process those. So a lot of the stories that you see being created now in speeches are from that time because they're fully processed. So I was cleaning my mum's house from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. for 6 months. My mum is a hoarder, and just the sheer sadness of seeing someone's unraveling through possessions robbed me of any sort of desire to create anything beautiful, anything aesthetic. It just created a huge block, and I disconnected from myself. So I had been a creative and now I was cleaning, and I couldn't reconcile that gap. And it took years and years to reconcile that gap. And then the second time that I mentioned that I didn't want to create is when I was being forced at like gunpoint because of my employment pass to stay in Singapore at this company to produce really huge volumes, but really lame content, like the kind of stuff that we were doing in 1995. And then now, it's just, we would do events where we'd have to go down to a car park and give out Yakult, which is like yogurt drink. It was just so soul crushingly uninspiring. And what I realized there was that was probably a really good thing because it developed a fierceness and a ferocity for creative ideas that I didn't really have before. Because I was forced to be doing bad content, it made me yearn to do good content. So it was actually a real blessing. Yeah. And this whole conversation, what we're talking about is actually self-connection. It's you, whether you're a creative or not a creative, knowing how your brain works and what you need to be at your optimal best.
How did you tap into that and know, who you are? And how did you tap into that?
I think it was just feeling the internal gut revulsion at some of the things that I was being made to produce and just going, this is not content that's inspiring. It does not serve people. And seeing the bitchiness in the office as well was really heartbreaking. So that's one thing that I learned, was that, like, for creatives to create well, you have to be a connected person. So you have to have good social human connections. And why I say that is, if you look at any great art or any great product or movie that's ever been created, it could be inspired by a relationship. It could be inspired by any sort of falling in love, for example. So a lot of the things that create great artwork is actually from a level of human connection. And so I think that seeing that there was a link between toxicity, bullying, bad, like, disconnection and bad content made me go, okay, I want to save myself. Like, I want to be happy and create work that inspires people and that adds value.
Now, moving on to stepping up, another great point you've spoken about. Can you tell us more about stepping it up, and I suppose how it's how you put your ego aside and your personal story with your mum? Could you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So when I was in my 20s, I was really blessed and got this job to go to Dubai and work for Virgin Radio. And it was an extremely creative, liberated work environment. People were very positive and creativity was really held up. And I just grew in that market. But I think really had disconnection in another way. Like, maybe had such bad imposter syndrome that I overcompensated by being really obnoxious and sassy. And that's actually when we see ego, what ego is. It's not an alignment. For me, authenticity is actually an alignment of your internal values and your external behaviors. Wow, I should really make a graphic on that. That's my own definition of it, because I felt it internally happen when everything that I did was in sync. All my behaviors were in sync with my internal values, was when my life really started to glow. And it also helps to build connection too, because the way you behave when you show up is consistent. And when we're consistent, we build trust. Trust builds connection, right? So that time I was very misaligned. So the good, nice Simone was still there, but I think the shininess and the need for connection and significance had really brought me out of alignment. So the ego was, when I talk about the ego being big, that's actually what it was. And then my mum had a huge stroke. She has a degenerative disease, and this disease puts everyone who has it into a wheelchair. And so I remember getting the phone call and my sister telling me to come home. And the moment I saw my mum, I knew that my life would change. But I think now, with the self-connection I have now, I wanted my life to change. Like, I wanted to be aligned, but I had no idea how many years it would take. Well, it took about 7 years, 6 years, how painful it would be. It is so painful to be honest with yourself about all the ugliness in your life. It is so painful. I think that's why most people don't want to do that sort of work, because I thought it was going to be easy. And it just, if I'd known how hard it was going to be, Louise, maybe I never would have gone back. And so I went back to take care of her, and it was extremely humbling experience. I went from living this very glamorous life to, being in a nursing home. I got a job on the radio in Perth, in my hometown. That was also really humbling, because I had to do an 8-hour day for the first time in many years, whereas overseas you could just do your 4-hour radio shift and leave. And then for the little bits of time I would have left, I would be hanging out with the nursing home, and I became very lonely, because at that time, all of my friends' parents were still really healthy. So I couldn't have dialogues with people because I felt no one understood. And the stress of my mum's condition was on my mind all the time, that when I would be around people, I couldn't be normal. It's like when you grieve, when someone passes away, you are like a walking wounded, and it's really hard to tell other people how you're hurting. The wonderful thing is now, because it's been processed, I can tell people exactly what I was feeling and what it was like. And it's so wonderful to feel that these speeches make other people feel less alone. But at that time, I really didn't have the vernacular, like the words to describe my pain. And that whole process was extremely humbling. Like when you are brought down to a low, the real lows in life are the ones that you're not expecting to bring you down that much, right? I think I expected it to be uncomfortable. I don't think I imagined that level of discomfort. And so it obliterated my ego. It made me very, very, it made me understand life a lot more, like what is actually a priority. You know, what are my values and priorities? And it's different for everyone else, but that alignment was able to happen. I realized that actually creativity and connection were more important to me than success and money. And I think before that, living in somewhere like Dubai and being very young, I was very confused. I was like, well, everyone's chasing this. I should chase this. And now, because I know what's really important to me, it's like a North Star. So every time a situation comes up, I go, well, yeah, that's great that that girl's doing that or that, yeah, but that's not your values. So don't get distracted, honey. Like that's not what you're about. So those humbling experiences are fantastic learning vehicles.
I like ego is so hard to put aside. We work with, being in recruitment, we work with so many people, and they always we can tell that they're unhappy with their job, and they want to seek something new, and they come and speak to us and they say, what else can I do? You know, and they say, I really want to be a teacher, or I really want to do this. But the thing that gets them is their ego and the title, and it's really hard for them to put that to one side.
So you raised such a good point. One of the things that I was noticing when I was at this radio station, not the one in Dubai, but the one here in Singapore, was that people would rather earn next to nothing media money and retain some form of public persona versus leaving, creating something where, yeah, maybe you're more anonymous, but actually not really. In the social media age, you could keep your brand going if you're willing to do the work, and make many, many times the money. Like I look at some of the people I work with, I was like, they're so talented. They could be doing, but it's to say that I'm a radio DJ with XYZ station, which is what people are hanging on to. And I would never have been able to make the leap. I would still be one of those people had I not left Virgin Radio and felt what it was to lose that title, to go, yeah, you can do it again. It wasn't that bad. Like of all the things you went through during that 2014, that is not the worst thing, losing the radio title, right? So it was, yeah, it's so big. Like I look at my partners in finance, I look at a lot of the people in finance, and because they've had such a good salary for so long, even though they might want to leave, particularly with men, the identity is very deeply tied to the job title. But honestly, from one entrepreneur to another, oh my God, how did I not do this earlier? Like it is like you have to be into the hustle and you have to have it in your DNA, and it's in my DNA. Like I cannot believe I stayed working for someone else for that long. And I wish that people could experience this happiness that I experience now and just take the leap, because it's going to be okay. Like I probably stayed at that job 2 years too long. Yeah. Like I get now asked, it's so funny. And just to contextualize this, the other day I got asked to be nominated for like a women's entrepreneurial award for young women. And they're like, all you have to be is 35 and under. And I was like, well, I'm actually 37 this year. So that 2 years, like that we laugh about, also is 2 years. Actually, it's actually costing me. I try not to have regrets, but if I had been able to let go of that identity earlier, I could have been out 2 years earlier easily. So if you're watching this and you're umming and ahhing about taking the leap, depending on what market you live in, because of course COVID is affecting different parts of the world differently, please be brave and take the leap, especially if you're in a toxic workplace.
And you did mention it's hard to find to break it down and then find your values, and it's hard and it takes work. And again, people don't want to put in that work and that effort into actually finding themselves.
And I think it's also about, because I just listened to one of your podcasts that you're featured in, and you talk about how good you are at managing people. And so even with the type of business, right? Like my ego could tell me, oh, Simone, you want to expand and have staff and all this kind of rubbish. I have a 1+1 business model. I have an assistant, right? I am not good at managing people. I'm an artist, right? I'm creative. And as a result of knowing that, I realized that if I expanded too quickly, maybe it will happen one day. But if I do it in a way that's inorganic and doesn't align with me, I could actually spend a lot of money on salaries and not be effective because I'm not a great manager yet. I have to do some education there. And that's about being real with yourself too, and not being driven by the ego of like, oh, XYZ's got a full team doing all their social media or this or that, or Louise is doing this. It's like, know you, self-connect. Like, what's your character? Do I want to wake up in the morning and managing people is 80% of my job, or do I want to wake up in the morning and creating is 80% of my job? And I'm definitely the latter. So if you are going to become an entrepreneur, like, know what you're good at.
Correct. It's very good. And delegate the rest. Delegate what you're not good at to something else. Now, for you, I suppose it is hard to step up, to put your ego aside, but what have been the rewards and benefits for you?
Yes. So firstly, my mum and I have been closer than we've ever been. My dad and I was daddy's girl. My dad passed away when I was 19. And so it took a long time for mum and I to become close like this. And it's by far, when she passes away and when our time together is over, I'm going to be able to let her go with no regrets. And I think that that's having dealt with profound loss before with my dad in a direct family. You don't, when someone says goodbye, you don't want to be carrying that. I mean, that's a level of trauma that doesn't need to be there. So sometimes swallowing your ego and swallowing your pride. My mum was not an easy mum by any means, but forgiving and being the bigger person and putting the ego aside is all part of great, profound, real connection. And I'm glad to say that I now have that with my mum, which is fantastic. Um, Other rewards include, getting rid of the ego, humility. And I think as well, it's the process of knowing myself, like the stepping up. If you don't choose the road less traveled, which is often the harder road to walk down, you don't actually reap the same rewards of staying comfortable. And that's anyone who's got a level of resilience will tell you. So I'll give you an example. So when COVID hit, because my level of resilience is so high, like I've literally seen my father pass away in front of me, in front of my eyes. My level of resilience is so high that people were like, how are you sailing through and killing it in 2020? Because for me, as long as no one I love is dying, of course, there's a lot of tragedy around the world, but please also understand Singapore is its own like bubble, which is very regulated by the government and very, very safe. I had people writing to me, about losing money and businesses, and all of those things are really terrible. But when you've dealt with like loss, like you can make money back. I cannot bring my father back from the dead, right? So the beautiful reward of stepping up, also choosing the harder road to walk down, is also the level of resilience it gives you to be able to walk through life really with a level of confidence that you're always going to be okay. And I didn't have that in my 20s. Before mum got sick, before I stepped up, I really was in a constant fight or flight. So stepping up also includes doing the hard personal work. Like I had a counselor who was amazing and my life changed. Like people saw my life change as a result of going to someone who really suited me. Everyone, we have different needs. You can go to a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or whatever you want, but find a mentor or a guide that helps you work on your personal development in that way. And when I say it's stepping up, it is, because you have to look at all your ugliness, like held up as a mirror to your face, and you can't turn away. And I think that is hard, but it's a form of stepping up that leads to incredible rewards, because you can carry that greater level of happiness and connection with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah. If that didn't happen back in 2014, do you think you would be where you are now?
Oh, hell no, girl. Actually, I went to that particular counselor here in Singapore, and that was 2015 when all of the like I was still grieving, and then all this craziness was happening at that workplace, and I just I wasn't keeping a lid on it anymore. Like I'd have outbursts and stuff, so I knew that something was really wrong, and so I went to speak to her, and it just changed everything. I got when people are not mentally super healthy, they ruminate. So if something happened at work or something bitchy was said, I would continue to think about it till I wouldn't sleep. But what that particular therapist, that counselor, did for me was it showed me the science behind all of it. Like, why was I constantly in fight or flight? Why was I triggered? What is a trigger? How is it possible that it's affecting, how I digest my food and all of these things? And that's why a lot of the work now that I do with connection is I'm constantly reading the latest studies. Like, a new one just came out. I was reading it about COVID and human connection, written by some guys at Stanford. And it's really important that when I now get a platform to speak, that I'm not just talking about human connection, like, I'll hug each other, woo woo. I'm connecting it for people to science, so that if they're feeling disconnected, they're not self-blaming. And I think before therapy, because I didn't know what was happening to me, there was a lot of self-loathing, which didn't need to be there, because you're not alone. It's based on science. And once you start going down that road of self-development, you can read books and take courses where all of the information circles back and reconfirms. And so that becomes a larger truth versus the truth in your head where you're like, why are these people saying this to me? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? It literally took me from real self-loathing to going, you're not alone. There's studies on this. All of these other people have gone through this for the last 60 years. So you're not alone here, girl. And so I think knowledge is very empowering in that way.
I want to touch on human connection now, because it is an area you are specializing in, and we are living in a world where, although we feel connected through all the social media channels, we're actually not really connecting, or we're disconnected. And now that the pandemic's hit, we're even more disconnected than ever before, because we can't physically sit down and speak to someone face to face or touch them or whatever it might be. But could you share with us what the impact it is having on us from a social and a mental point of view, not having that physical human connection?
Sure. So a couple of things. Firstly, if you've ever seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a very famous pyramid that explains human beings' basic needs. There's things like food, water, shelter at the base of the pyramid. And at the top of the pyramid is self-actualization. So living at your fullest potential. And just after food, shelter, water, and these basic needs will be belonging, right? Belonging and love, which is a form of human connection. And why he was so intelligent to put that in that pyramid, probably before a lot of the science was revealed, it was based on interviews with loads of people, like the difference between people who thrive and the people who don't, and how trauma is formed that can, in some cases, limit people because they don't get the love and connection that they need very early on. And so what we see now, backing up that model with the science, is that when we're disconnected, because we are tribal creatures that grew up in communities that kept us safe as early man, hunter-gatherer societies, when we were cast out of the tribe, our brain, early man brain, would be flooded by stress hormones. So when we are cast out, even now, our surroundings have exponentially technologized, but we haven't. We still have that caveman brain in our head. So when we're disconnected, we still have a stress response, which is why if you find out a group of people were bitching about you, you will have a fight or flight response. You might have rage, but you will be in a fight or flight mode. Cortisol, norepinephrine, adrenaline, you'll be flooded by these hormones. And when you have stress hormones in your body chronically over a long period of time, which happens to people who are lonely, it can lead to many life-shortening diseases. So I always say the irony is that we are social distancing or physically distancing during a pandemic to help our immunity. Yet the act of social distancing itself, long after this pandemic is over, is actually going to have a chronic lowering of immunity on a very, very large scale. And that's why it's the pandemic under our noses that we're not paying attention to, that we need to really, really be worried about. So when people are talking about, I have a bit of a following on TikTok, and the kids are very young on there, okay? I'm old enough to be their mum. And it's funny, because I know all of this stuff, I have a gap of knowledge that I take it for granted they don't. And so a lot of them will write to me about, I have anxiety, I have anxiety, I have anxiety, in a way that maybe my 36-year-old generation, anxiety wasn't talked about. And I had to explain to one of them that, anxiety can be linked to disconnection. So she was saying, I don't want to go out and meet people because it gives me anxiety. I said, but if you don't go to meet people, it's going to give you more anxiety and it's going to circulate because your brain is wired for connection. We need it. That's why it has this evolutionary response. So that is the really long answer. And again, the science behind it. So when you feel lonely, you are going to feel a bit stressed. So when we were separated during social lockdowns, I was on my own. I wasn't living with my partner at the time. And I knew from the science, is like, you have good, loving people in your life, but you are still going to have reduced quality of sleep, which a lot of people experience. And that's due to something that I don't know if we have time for that, but I would explain that if I had more time. You're going to still feel a level of stress because you're not going to have that human connection and the oxytocin that comes from touch.
Yeah.
So that's just it. We get dopamine, reward hormone, when we connect with a new human being. Like, we get that. So that is a feel-good hormone that we need for our mental health that we're not getting because we're not connecting with new people. We're circulating amongst our existing connections. So I think that that's something that people need to be aware of. And also, you probably would have heard this, Louise, and people say to you, you've got girlfriends who maybe are still single through their 30s. And this was me. I was single for 8 years before my current partner. And, I knew I had good friends. I knew I had a much better relationship with my family than I'd ever had before. Yet I felt lonely and I felt ashamed for saying that until I discovered, there are 3 rungs of loneliness. One is intimate loneliness, and this is craving for an intimate partner or relationship. Then you can have relational loneliness, which is craving for family and a close group of friends. And the third that you can have is collective loneliness. And that's a craving for a group of people that share your purpose and mission. So if you are missing just one of these 3, you will have encountered a sense of loneliness and a sense of fight or flight as a result of that loneliness on different rays of the spectrum, right? So that tells you that loneliness is a pervasive human condition. Disconnection is a pervasive human experience. And so we've all had it, and now we're all going to be having it magnified. So the more you can know about it, the more you can feel like you're less alone and you're less crazy, basically.
Is there anything we can do because obviously the pandemic will be through 2021 as well, and there's going to be some more lockdowns. Some countries are still in lockdowns and can't see anybody. And I know here in Australia, or in Victoria especially, some companies are going back, but others are still working remotely. What can we do to, I suppose, not feel that loneliness when we're working at home?
So expanding on those 3 layers, I think, Louise, you're doing something incredible. When I talk about collective loneliness, yearning for a tribe, you're creating a tribe, and I do this too, of like-minded entrepreneurs or people that you are interested to interview who have a similar set of values as you, that helps you to feel connected to a tribe bigger than you. And by the way, if you're an entrepreneur, you should totally do that, because you'll find if you're an entrepreneur surrounded by people of 9-to-5 jobs, there are certain issues that can't be discussed with your full-time employed friends. So anyone who's an entrepreneur should do this anyway, pandemic or not. So I have a group of girls all over the world who are in the speaking business. Some are coaches, some are speakers, but along that spectrum. And we do connection over Zoom. The other thing that you can do to combat relational loneliness, so that's a feeling of not being connected with your family and close friends, is I want you to try and have deeper conversations with them. If they ask you, how are you? Tell them honestly, it's a pandemic, it's time. Like, just, be there and have deeper conversations, because having new connection right now is going to be really, really difficult. It just is, because we can't go out and accidentally bump into each other. The wonderful news is, at the end of all of this, we're going to be more thirsty and more inspired to connect than ever, even though we're all going to be a little bit socially awkward at first.
I was going to say, I haven't been to a networking event for a very long time, I think since March last year. And I think I'm going to be a bit socially awkward when I go back.
Yeah, I did an in-person speech to a socially distanced audience in December. And I was just, so excited, because I'm an extrovert, right? So the studies show that introverts and extroverts, their level of connections, the number of their connections do range, that they are different. but when you're like an extreme extrovert like I am, like the excitement, the anticipation of connection I had to keep a lid on it. I was just like needy, a little bit needy, frankly. So we are all going to be a little bit socially awkward. The best thing that we can do is to empathize, and understand that everyone is the same position. And I always like to get people to frame in their mind, if they're going to a place where they're going to meet people, to frame it that you're there to serve. So you're there to validate other people's stories and listen to other people's, and that just takes you out of yourself. And makes you listen better. And listening is obviously a great component of connection as well, because if you don't listen properly to people's content, what they're saying to you, you can't connect well with them.
Correct. That's very true. We've connected through Zoom and through LinkedIn, and I think there's going to be more connections through Zoom. There's Zoom meetings, meeting new clients through Zoom, friends and things like that. How do we build that rapport, that trust, that relationship through a Zoom call? Because it is different than physical, like
Absolutely.
having a coffee. What can we do there?
I have a webinar that I deliver to corporates called Connect on Camera, and that's taken from years of obviously being a broadcaster, but some married with the human connection material. So firstly, eye contact. So don't look at your reflection. You've got to look down the small camera at the top of the laptop. I've actually got some stickers for my business printed on these that we're going to sell soon. But the reason that that's really important is studies show that when we avert eye contact, and I know this sounds logical, but I'm just going to repeat it. Okay. When we avert eye contact, the receiver perceives us as less trustworthy. And so if we're less trustworthy, we can't build connection, because trust is a cornerstone of connection. So that eye contact is really important. I'm sorry, my puppy is snoring in the background. Charlie. That's not me snoring, it's my puppy.
I can't hear.
She's really going to get loud at any moment now. I know what her snoring is like. Another thing that's really important is your energy. And the camera is not like in person. So you're going to have to give 30% extra energy on camera to make sure that you look interested, particularly if the person's viewing you in gallery view during their presentation and you're kind of like, just being normal and slouching, but on camera, it's going to make you look really low energy and almost disinterested. So you need to pump it by 30% up. And my big hack for that is to think about the thing that you're most excited about. For me, it was receiving the other day a new Tarte palette from Sephora that was my perfect nude color when I put it on. And so if I think of little things like this, it just gives me the right perk without being needy and scary, but just that positive, perky, excited energy, which will look absolutely normal to the recipient over Zoom. The other thing about Zoom etiquette is as well, it is absolutely fine to look down the barrel of the camera when you're delivering, but when someone else is presenting or speaking, to defer attention to them. You can smile and nod, but take your gaze away from the camera so that you can really see their face and everything. Then when it's for your time to talk, you can talk. And the reason I say that is video conferencing is not normal. If you've ever tried to talk over someone, and I love to do my little witty quips, and it just doesn't land because it just disrupts the video conference. So we are looking at slicing communication where one person is literally talking at one time. And that's just the technology that we have right now. I'm sure someone's working on improving it as we speak. So those are my top 3 tips.
It's interesting because throughout last year, a lot of companies did networking events through Zoom. And I would think, I'm like, how does this even work? Because there's only one person that can be talking at a time. Is it doable? Are networking events doable on Zoom?
I just had someone tell me yesterday about Hopin. I think it's called Hopin. There are different technologies coming out to make it more easy. I think it's absolutely doable. I think connection, in my TEDx, I talk about how my mum's dementia sometimes stops me from connecting with her. But because that connection means so much to me, I will persist like I'm running a marathon. So here's my question for you is like, how important is it for you to make a connection? If it's worth it, you will persist through the fact that it's on Zoom. You will try your hardest. You will do the etiquette tips I just told you. And then you will follow up over email later. Like if it's worth, look, if Oprah Winfrey got on our Zoom right now, Louise, would you not make an effort? We would, right? We would. And we see that happening now with Clubhouse, right? With everybody getting, and that's another conversation for another day. But, you've got to just think, is my mental health a priority? Is my mental health and happiness a priority? If it is, now that I've explained to you how it's connected to connection, isn't that enough for you to want to persist through a boring Zoom networker? It is for me. I've got three girlfriends in Switzerland. It was the four of us when I studied there, and we're thick as thieves. And we did a catch up the other day, all four of us. And Singapore's opening up now, so I can actually go meet people in person. So that's obviously my preference. So getting on Zoom with my three best girlfriends in Europe when they're in lockdown is not, I could be out meeting people in person, but they are so important to me. Persisting and keeping that connection since we were 17 years alive is so important that no issue, I'll jump on. So I think that's all about emotional leverage.
Mm-hmm. I think I've had a few conversations with people this year, and they've already said, I don't want to go back into the office. I just want to stay at home and work from my home office. I don't think that's healthy, but what are your thoughts on that?
So I was just I've got an interview tomorrow for Salesforce that I'm working with. I'm their podcast host, and the guy's a futurist, very famous guy called Peter Schwartz. And it was one of the questions that we asked him. And he said that it is the new norm, but it's not going to be as extreme. So you're going to see it, 50% of it will stay. So people will not be going to the office as much. I think that, from what the science tells me, it's not super healthy for us to do that. However, if it's staggered, like if it's 3 days a week you're in the office and not, I think that that's fine, because what that fosters as well in the days that you're home is a greater level of self-connection. So don't think just because you're not connecting with other people that you're not doing some form of connection. Sometimes the quiet is being used to check in with ourselves, and that's not a bad thing at all. Learning to be okay on your own without being lonely is, there's solitude versus loneliness, right? It's possible to have solitude and be very happy.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Before we close, is there any, I suppose, final thought you wanted to leave us with that we all should take away for 2021?
Look, I want everyone to be positive and to know that, look, the world has come through this as it is, and we're going to see people who are more resilient, a human race that is going to prioritize connection more. And we're also going to see people hopefully deepening their values and their values and their moral code. Because prior to this, we were living in a Kardashian world. That said, I have interviewed the Kardashians, so no hate there at all. But we were at our Instagram height. We were completely absorbed with materialism. This is kind of where we were. And look, I like a nice dress like everyone else, but I think we were getting out of moderation. I think there's something about COVID-19 that has recalibrated and pulled us back and reminded us that we are all connected, because it became a experience that started in Asia, but it didn't stay there. Everyone now shares this experience. So we are all connected.
Simone, you were amazing. And thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you so much for having me, beautiful.
And that's it. Another episode of Gatehouse Insights draws to an end. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing this video with your friends. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel where you can see more.